Making an Athlete.
Hi, I'm Ty Davis with Making an Athlete podcast.
If you're relying on somebody else to get you to where you want to be, then you might not get there.
This is Making an Athlete podcast. I'm Ty Davis, and on today's show, we talk to Jordan Ferrell, current head coach of the semi-professional Oakland Roots Football Club. Farrell is the former head coach of the MLS-bound Sacramento Republic's U17 and U19 academy teams and former assistant coach for the Division I University of the Pacific's men's soccer team. Farrell previously played professionally in Germany before moving into his coaching career. Jordan joins us today to discuss youth soccer in the United States and talk soccer culture fit and the importance it plays in the recruiting process and the team's success. Jordan Ferrell, head coach of Oakland Roots Sports Club. And I appreciate you getting on today to talk to me about soccer.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be on. Thanks for having me. And I'm excited for the conversation.
All right. And so we're talking about your college experience, your semi-professional experience, and then now your experience on the other side as a head coach of the Oakland Roots Sports Club. You know, start off as a kid, you know, how did you start playing soccer? How did you choose soccer? And did you play any other sports growing up?
I started, I played sports my entire life. My dad was a Division I football player. And he also played basketball and other sports growing up. So he was a big part of my sporting experience. And I had an older brother who was, as you know, if you have two boys in a house, your parents want you to get a lot of energy out, and sports is a good avenue for that. So we grew up playing literally every sport in the neighborhood I grew up in. I would say soccer is a sport that I probably played the longest. My brother was 3 years older than me, so he started playing at 5. And by the time, it was like 3.5 or 4 when you could get into a league of some sort, I started playing as well. So, and I played, my entire life since then. But I also played T-ball all the way through, the end of majors as a 12-year-old, and played basketball as well, ran track in high school. And all of those sports, I was always, kind of pretty good. I wasn't like the best of the best, but I also wasn't average. So it was a good experience for me to have, whether it's individual sport or team sport experience growing up. It was cool. Very different to kind of the sporting landscape now. I think a lot of people, especially around my age, would have had that multi-sport experience on some level. But now it's all sport specialization. So it's a little bit different. But when I got to high school, so actually we won the section with my track team the spring of my senior year, and we're pretty good. I got a couple guys that went to the NFL, a couple guys that went on to were like junior track. Some of the guys went in for the U.S. team, and at 16, 17 years old. So we were pretty good.
That's a nice roster. Where did you go to high school, or what school was that?
Yeah, Lincoln High School here in Stockton. So
okay.
It's a sports school. A lot of guys going all over the country for, I would say male and female from the school, going all over the country for sports of all types, from volleyball, basketball, but a lot of like the football players, basketball players, and soccer players, we all ran track together in the spring, those that didn't play baseball. So it was a cool team because it was a team of guys that were all really good in their other sports. And then we came together and were competitive in track. So it was pretty awesome. But I had to make a decision as I went into college. And my big thing was that I saw myself as an athlete. I couldn't imagine going to school for just school. So, because I didn't play like a lot of club soccer. I guested in some tournaments and things like that when I was growing up. But I wasn't really involved in the club circuit or in the recruiting process as it was back then. So had a couple bites at Division II schools, Division III schools, and settled not too far from home in the Bay Area at Cal State East Bay. And honestly, as a person, probably the best 4 years. And as a player, I think I learned a lot. definitely learned that I wanted to be a coach during the 4 years in college. And as a player, I was a pretty good player in a very average team for a couple of years, I think. But it was a good experience because I always wanted more. I always wanted to learn more. I think nowadays, somebody who is in my shoes probably would have transferred after the first 2 years when I realized kind of what the bigger soccer world was. You get into college and you play on teams in the summer, you play indoor, you play with guys, a lot of the local guys were like Stanford and Cal and San Francisco State and, San Jose State, like those types of schools were all the guys that we were playing pickup with. And so it really opened my eyes during that period of time. Plus, during that period of time was the best thing that could have happened. I got like the soccer channels, which at the time was like 2 channels, but I started watching like just an insane amount of soccer. I would watch like probably 4 games a day.
Wow.
We had DVR too. And my friends would always joke, like, they'd leave my house and I'd be watching a game and they'd come back a couple hours later and I would be watching games. So, it was those things that kind of really opened my eyes. And then, in college, you just have so much free time. So I just used to work with the ball every single day. Stuff that a lot of players did as younger kids, I did in college, just working, on my touch repeatedly with the wall. And I think that's what allowed me to, as I finished college, be able to go have a okay semi-pro experience here in the U.S. and then overseas. I went to Germany for a couple years afterwards, after graduating, or for about a year and a half, and it was a really good experience to see an incredible soccer culture, an incredible soccer structure, like the German structure for player development and for competition is one of the best in the world, and so. It was just an awesome experience to be there. And then to see like, hey, I'm 22 years old and this little 10-year-old sees the game and has better technique than I'll ever have. So It was motivating because I started working. So I worked camps a lot in college during the summer to make some money. But when I went over to Germany is when I actually started like coaching a team, and I was an assistant coach. It was cool. The first club that I was at, I was able to, the kids in the U11s and U12s spoke English at about the level that my German was. So we got on because they were trying to learn their English. They were, that's where I guess they begin kind of the English studies, some earlier than others, but I was learning German rapidly, and it was good to talk with kids that could help explain stuff. So it was a cool experience. Both my parents are educators. I've worked in education my entire life. So I kind of had that feeling about education, but soccer was really the sport that kind of lit my fire, obviously the stuff in college. And then, so I started coaching while I was over there. And my second club that I was with, I took the playing contract because I could be an assistant for the U17s, and our U17s were, they were good. They played in the second division in Germany, which was in Bavaria, and Bavaria is like to Germany what California is to kind of the United States, I would say. Like it's a bigger state, it's the more well known. You have teams that like Bayern Munich that have come out of there, so it's a real powerhouse on the global scale. And there's just a lot of really good players there and good clubs. So that 17s team was awesome. We actually beat Bayern Munich, like one of my first like big wins as a coach, as an assistant, was at Bayern Munich. Our U17s played there like U16, and it was huge. So great experience there. And then I just knew, I knew I wanted to come back, start my master's, and really get started coaching. And specifically here in Stockton, where I grew up, I think the structure of soccer, especially inside the United States, like I said, competition-wise and player development, is at a interesting point. 10 years ago is at a really interesting point, but it's such fertile soil. So it was cool. I was very passionate about it. And then I moved back and really jumped into coaching, and have been really kind of a like full-time coach at almost every level for the last 8-9 years. My time here in the Central Valley, and now being in the Bay Area, in an area that's, I would say, underdeveloped from a soccer structure standpoint, which is makes it a unique place, and it has been a unique project working here, and I've gotten to know some really cool people in that process. So that's a little bit my journey to this point, multi-sport, but dove into coaching. I did my master's in coaching science, sports pedagogy.
Okay.
Because that was, I did my undergrad in sociology. I figured if I understand people and how they interact, then no matter what job I end up doing, I'm going to be needing that. So that was kind of my reason behind that. But then, my master's degree was definitely what I wanted to do, knew what I wanted to do. And it was a terrific experience at Pacific, actually, kind of how you and I met. So,
yeah. And so when you mentioned Pacific, and I don't know if we talked about it on this podcast, he's, talking about University of Pacific, based out of Stockton there. Like you mentioned, this is where we met. I was a baseball player there, and you were, how did we meet there? Because the soccer program.
Yeah, so I was
yet.
Exactly. So I was actually my first full-time coaching job. A lot of college coaches, and not all of them, but a lot of college coaches, you're not getting paid all that well for coaching college. So you also work in club, or it's just a really good way to connect the youth to the college level. So, my first job was working with the club while I was an assistant at Delta College, the junior college. That's there, right. Just literally a mile up the road. And then I got on as a head coach for about 2 years. And all the while I was working through my master's at UOP. So when I got to, actually we found out our master's class, and some people in the department, we found out they were getting men's soccer. So cool, like really cool for the region. I say region, kind of the Central Valley, because, you have Merced, which is an NAI school. You have a lot of junior college activity in the Central Valley for sure. But Fresno State doesn't have a men's soccer program. Stanislaus has a men's soccer program, and they're D2, and they do a really good job of having local players in there. But and then you have the Davises and Sac State. But really, UOP is an awesome place. The field, the facilities, the school is an awesome place to start Division I soccer. So, I was obviously on campus, knew a lot about Pacific. My wife, she wasn't my wife at the time, but we were dating, and she was working for the women's basketball program. So I knew a lot of what was going on. So when they hired Ryan Jordan as a head coach, I actually found him at a women's soccer game like a couple days after it was announced, and he and I chatted, and I kind of told him what I felt about like the opportunity here. And so then after my fall season, I made the move over to UOP. And so he had been on since August. There's no team on campus, only a club team. And he was just recruiting. So, and getting everything in place, obviously starting a brand new program from scratch. There's a lot to be done.
Yeah.
So he had, I think about 11 players signed when I got on in January. I started January of 2013. No, January 2014. And that inaugural season was that fall. So we signed 12 more players over the course of the spring and really got going. There was a lot of buzz around the program. Obviously, I'm from Stockton, so it was cool for a lot of the people that I grew up with in the soccer scene here to be real supportive. I think our first preseason friendly in the fall, there's no marketing or anything like that. And about 700 or 800 people in the stands, and it was just against Dominican or something like that, D2. And so it was just cool to see the process of building a program like that from scratch. It was 30 years ago that they closed the program down, Division I soccer. So
you guys went right in there and brought it to national ranks, within the first couple of years that you were there.
Yeah. Some people, it looks, it's one of those things where it looks like it happened really fast. I think for all of us that were on the inside, it was gut wrenching, because we went through the first 2 years of I think we won a total of 4 games across the first 2 years. And one of those games was against a Division III opponent. So it was it wasn't even, but there was an identity that we were trying to get to.
Right.
I think that was the piece. And that was what Ryan and I spoke about. And we got, good support from other people. Our staff was amazing in 2016 when we actually made what was from 15 to 16 was the best tournament in NCAA history. So from 115-1 to 13-4-2. So that was really cool. And to see them go on, I made the move shortly after, to a different opportunity just up the road, but to see them go on, and for the next couple of years, they've been awesome and really compete against, unfortunately, Stanford's in our region. And so, Stanford, they've met Stanford twice, I think, in the national tournament, 16, 17, and then 18 they had to go out and play Duke in the second round. But it's been a couple of years that they've been in the national tournament, and really just a different way of doing things. Ryan's obviously moved to UCLA, and so we'll see what the new coach there brings. But Ryan built an incredible program, and it showed on the field. It showed with the type of guys that were there, because the recruiting strategy was, hey, we're not going to get the big name guys out of these big clubs, but let's be really smart and resourceful in finding late developers.
Okay.
Or guys who maybe it's a psychological thing, or guys who maybe we play, and the big thing was maybe we play a way that values certain players that most people won't. And that really changed, I would say that really changed it for us, is that after year 2, we had a big change in the squad. Some guys left, some guys graduated. And then we were able to bring in a couple guys that really made a difference, but they were built on top of a core that was, we had guys on the field in that third year who had played a lot of games and lost a lot of games and hated losing. And so we added to that. We added to that culture some guys that were, from out of the country and from inside the country that could really make a difference. And it was it was a cool process there.
Okay, well that's pretty cool, and I got to see that firsthand, which was pretty awesome. Seeing that program grow. I was part of the athletic department post my graduating and playing baseball, and worked there in that department, and got to see the beginning part of you guys working hard to build that up. I wasn't at the university anymore once you guys actually started playing your games, your matches, sorry. But what I want to dive into is kind of what you're talking about there, and what a lot of the listeners like to understand and learn about. So a lot of parents and the current youth athletes out there is understanding that recruiting process, and specific to soccer. You kind of mentioned how when you were growing up, and it's a similar story for myself, is I didn't have a lot of exposure to year-round sports or club sports or travel ball. For me, I just lived in a certain area that what you had was American Legion, and you played seasonal sports. Now when you're looking at and even your experience overseas in Germany, what are the correct channels or the process that youth soccer players should be taking to get to that next level, whether it's any pre-high school and then getting to high school, and then after you answer that, we'll talk a little bit more about the college recruiting process. But I guess your view on that.
Yeah. So, soccer's in a crazy place, I would say, like right now inside the United States, because there's just a lot of attention being paid to it, and it's good. It's really, really beneficial for the sport. So while at Pacific, we also worked with a local club because we wanted to do that as well. We wanted to help guys get to use their soccer abilities to help get their education paid for. There's the reality of the professional aspiration is that there's some kids that can do that, and that's very few. And then the majority of kids, hey, like I played, I hear parents say like, well, we're putting a lot of money in and we want, something on the end. And you look at how much, first of all, club sports cost. And it's tough to see. But that's also one of the big avenues. I think that's where a lot of players are found for colleges, and
right.
I don't think it's so important to be in a club at 10 years old. I know I'm I know some club directors are probably going to kill me because they're like, "Hey, you're killing it." But no, I don't think it's so important to be there then. I think actually up until 12 is when kids should be, kids should be kids. They need to be playing with their friends and playing for the enjoyment of playing, and hopefully getting good coaching. Like that's the important piece. But up until 12, that's when you're building good movers. You're building people who can adapt, and you're trying to expose the person as a mobile human in as much different ways as possible. So different sports are really important. So I think you can talk about any number of things like dexterity, tactical creativity. You can talk about all things that prior to 12 are really, really important. Kids who play basketball see different solutions when they play soccer than somebody who only plays soccer. Kids who play baseball have a different space-time orientation to like beating out a throw or just the mechanics of throwing a ball. So those things are really important in building young players, and they prevent against injury. There's tons and tons of research. So, then after Pacific, I moved up to Republic, and that was cool because I worked at almost every age from, I did work every age from 12 years old up to 19 years old, building players, right?
Correct.
Yeah, Sacramento Republic in the youth academy. And so we were at a different level of that process of like getting guys to college and the professional ranks. So that was one avenue. And in soccer inside the United States, you have like club soccer, you have high school soccer, which club and high school usually go hand in hand. Okay. Where the clubs take in a certain region will take a break for the most part. Not every club will, but they'll take a break during the high school season so that players can do both. But academy soccer is a different. It's a different organization and it's a different beast. That's 10, 11 months out of the year. And that's where the MLS clubs are and a lot of other high profile academies are. And in soccer, it's an interesting, it's supposed to be a higher level. The academy is, and I don't know, in a lot of respects it is for sure. Okay. But there's also a lot of very talented players and very good teams that are developing players equally to the academy that aren't inside the academy competing. So the big thing for me about those players coming through is like finding the right fit for a player's development. And when we're talking about when we're talking about junior high school ages, I've seen very good players where they've rush to being in a car for an hour and a half a day, 2 hours a day at 13, 14, and that's probably stunted the player's development. And I've also seen very good players who didn't get into the right environment at 13, 14, and that stunted their development. So there's not a one size fits all really for in terms of developing a player to be ready for a college career or a professional career. There's not that avenue, at least in soccer, but you do want to be playing with better players and you do want to be playing in better competition. And I think that's the most important thing as players move into junior high and then really into high school. When I was with Republic, I really targeted 13s and 14s as players that we wanted with us. But if there was a player outside of there, we really targeted the U15 age group as like, hey, we want to have a lot of as they go into freshman year, because I have nothing against high school soccer. Obviously my experiences with high school soccer were incredible, but I'm also aware now of the standard difference. And I go and I watch high school soccer games, and there's an incredible social aspect to high school soccer, playing for your high school in front of your friends, and that type of stuff is great. But the standard of soccer is way different.
I could say I played. I was a goalie my sophomore year in soccer in high school, and I could say that I was nowhere near what any of those club players might be. So I'm that guy that you're talking about that is not. Yeah. Well, but really not that good at soccer. I was just there to play another sport, and I could tell you that if I were to go to a club, I'd be told to go home because I didn't have a chance to make it.
and that's like, that's hit or miss in the high school world. And I think, I say this because on social media or in the media, there's a big debate of like, oh, are academy players suffering not being able to play high school? And like, I can also say that there's some academies that don't do any better than some high schools. Like there's some high schools that do an incredible job. They're playing a way that's really developing players technically, tactically, and thinking about their physical and psychological development. And then there's some high schools that are like, hey, that's the players are the coaches, Yeah. So I think that's the part about why I say find the best fit for who you are as a player, as a young player, and then who you are as a family and what your values are. I think that's important. But at those ages, and at those ages, it's really crucial if you do have collegiate aspirations that you're playing with better players. Okay. And that doesn't necessarily mean winning games, but usually a hallmark of development is that there's a high level of top development, is that there's a high degree of competition and winning from that. So, I would say in soccer, the biggest thing is like to try to find people, if you're moving to a new place or you're in a certain community, it's like try to find people or places where players have gone on to college, and that'll give you a college or professional ranks, and that'll give you an indication of like, hey, they're doing something right there. And the big thing about the college process in youth development that I always say is like, there's so many different colleges. Division I is what everybody knows because it's the most visible, but there's so many colleges, and I've had players, friends of mine. Obviously, I was a Division III athlete, but I've had players go on to have professional careers after Division I, II, III. I've had players have incredible experiences at the NAIA level, and I know some very good NAIA coaches. So it's about really finding the right fit for you as a player and you as a family, because there's you could go Division I and be quite a bit in debt, or you could play NAIA and have zero debt and win a national championship, and then you have to decide kind of what's the best platform for you or avenue for you, and fit.
Yeah. I could say that, based off what you just said there, when I was recruited out of junior college for baseball, I had a D2 recruit me, and obviously University of Pacific, and I chose to go there, but that D2 went on to win the national title the next year. And you can always from the outside look at it and you're like, oh man, they got rings. But
yeah, exactly.
It's finding that right fit and choosing it. Now, you spoke a little bit about like the Sac Republic Academy is correct, what you called it. Mm-hmm. Do you talk a little bit? Academies are they kind of a newer thing in the United States compared to Europe? I know Europe has a lot of academies built into their professional teams. You mentioned it's a 10 to 11 month commitment. What goes into being a part of an academy, or being chosen to be at an academy as that's growing?
So the academy level was built about 10 years ago in by U.S. Soccer to address that kind of they espoused that it was to address the quality or the just array of options in the soccer landscape. And they wanted to kind of start filtering towards the top. Obviously, all of the MLS clubs now, it's a mandate that they have an academy in there. A lot of the second division, so USL clubs, are starting to build academies as well. And it's a way for some people to control their product, but it's also a way for some clubs that have maybe just simply better organization or higher aspiration to put themselves with a more competitive environment. The game day has a lot more structure. You see high standard of officiating. Everybody says whatever they want about officials, but a much higher standard of officiating and just quality. The quality control is a little bit there. And so the way of getting in is going to be different to every single club. Some of the clubs that I know that are academies, like they only choose from their club that's underneath them. And some of the other clubs they have scouting networks that they're finding players all over. So in terms of that, I think it's, again, like it's a wide open market, and everybody's going to do things differently. I know like some of the big MLS clubs, they scout all over the country and try to find kids in nooks and crannies that nobody knows them, and bring them into their academy and build them as players, away from home, and they're really just only focused on football and their academics. And then other academies are very localized, so they're going to deal with players only within their region. And you can go on ussoccer.com if you're unfamiliar with that. But I would say if somebody's interested in college, they could be aware they're probably aware of the difference between those two. But at Republic, it was an interesting process there, because the first year, 2 years, it was fully funded as if they were moving to MLS. And then there was some delay on the MLS announcement. And so the academy then morphed into, still a professional track, but there was pay to play associated with it now. And so that changed the dynamic of where, just to pause on MLS, just the academy saw a hit, in terms of what they were initially and then what they transitioned to. But I think there's just an announcement that they're signing their first two homegrowns, this year. And so as they move towards MLS, and so I think it's still a place, and there's quite a few guys that have come through that academy that are playing professionally, and every year a big class of guys playing Division I, Division II soccer out of the academy. So I think that was cool, because to be on the other side of the recruiting process of that high level, kids going to Ivy League. So some of the kids that I was coaching, they used the academy level to match their academic standard, and then go after, a slot in the Ivy League playing, because that was, for them, that was success. They wanted to get into a top level college, get a really good degree in that respect, and what they were looking for, and then maybe have some professional chances afterwards. But they were really self-aware that, like, hey, I'm going to college, and I'm using soccer as a tool for admission into a college of my choice. Then some of the other guys were like, hey, I'm going to college, but I'm only going to college for a year, 2 years to make it professionally. And so you had all these different tracks within and then we had guys in my U19s that were at junior college, had been there for a year, or in some cases they started early at junior college. So they were trying to kind of take care of academics, but also giving themselves a chance to play at a high level, see what happens professionally, and then maybe find a better college the year after high school than what the opportunities were when they were there, because that extra year of development was crucial for them. So the academy is, I would say you had guys that played on clubs in, like, right next door to the academy that are playing Division I soccer. But if you look at that, the teams that I have, you have a lot of guys going to Division I schools out of our teams. And so it shows that they were playing, coaches could come watch one of our games against another opponent, and there's, 11v11, and you have probably 15 Division I players on the field. So that's the difference between the academy and most club games. There's still some club games where you have, 20 Division I players on the field. So it's an interesting landscape.
Yeah. So let's talk about, before we're going to move on here shortly to kind of the recruiting process, but one last thing I want to touch on, as part of that's heavy part of that youth age group is two things. And that's individual lessons or finding a specific skills coach. What to look for in finding that coach, what's important. And again, what age is a good age to focus on having that one-on-one coaching. And then on top of that, understanding camps. And, in terms of baseball, you have camps that are hosted at universities, you have prospect camps, and you'll need to educate me a little bit better on soccer or football camps and what parents or athletes should be looking for in those camps. So first start on the individual lessons, what to look for, what's a good age, or even if there is, it is good to have individual lessons.
Yeah. So that's something that it's interesting. That's something that I think, got into soccer via a lot via American sports, and now you're finding like individual coaches of top professionals overseas as well. So I think the biggest thing that I found with individuals is that there's a lot of people out there trying to take money, and so it's important to know, again, the product of people. Obviously, it's accessibility and who can afford it and all that kind of stuff. But it's important that you just see like, hey, that guy has worked with these players and they've consistently gone on to this level that I want to be at. Hey, that's maybe a place where I should go. And then the age of it, I think the golden age of learning is 12 to 14. And so before that, it certainly always depends on the player. But before that, I've seen kids that are like, yeah, I mean, it's fun and all of that, but then they hit 12, 14 and then they're like not interested in the sport anymore. So I would say, deal with that as a player. Certainly as you get to a higher level, certain individual development things become really, really, really a priority. It can't just be, hey, I play on a team that wins, but I'm going to work on these aspects of my game that are going to improve. So that's my feeling on individual coaching. But the big thing that I see, and I see a lot of benefit to, are players who work with an individual strength and conditioning coach, because that can really help them take ground where their team sport coach doesn't spend a ton of time on that. And so, but technical skills is equally as important.
All right, let's talk about
I think
camps.
To the camps, to the ID camps and whatnot, they are an important tool for college. Every college coach does their camps differently, and that's something to be aware of. And then there are really good camps. Like I worked a couple camps when I was coaching where it was like quite a few coaches from different schools that were of different levels, and so the performances of players like maybe could have caught the eye of 3 or 4 coaches, where if they would have gone to a camp of only one school, they only would have interest from that one school. So at different points in time, those things are important. I would say in soccer generally as freshman, sophomore, even junior, you want to be going to those camps with more and more people. But as you're refining your process, if you really like a school, go to their camp. And if they really like you, they'll usually treat you well in that process at camp. If they don't really like you, not to say they're going to treat you poorly, but at least you'll have a better sense of who the coaching staff that you'll be wanting to play for is, and how the team plays and what the school is like. Those things that you can get from being on campus for these ID camps that are hosted by specific colleges.
All right, and that's like you're talking. That's important in finding the right camps or the right exposure. And you may not be able to, get an exact list of the universities there, but knowing that there's going to be several, and that if a university shows interest and you have that coach that you just build out a great relationship with, that's huge, because having that positive relationship with that coach and being on the same page can help you just develop, immensely once you get there, if you get there. Let's talk about that.
It's all about fit.
Exactly. And talking about fit, actually, if you can go back to, that time wasn't too long ago, your time at University Pacific, and that college aspect, what are some of the things that as a college coach you're looking at when you're recruiting a player? Even I know UOP, University Pacific, was Division I, but it doesn't have to be just Division I. It could be 2, 3 in AIA or even JUCOs. You could speak on your experience, but what are you looking for in athletes and being able to bring them to your university?
Yeah. So one of my core values was growth mindset. And I think that shows in a lot of different ways, but we talk about ceiling like athletically, and that was always important for us as at UOP. We wanted to always project what's a guy's ceiling, athletically, technically, and then the psychological piece. And that's where the growth mindset was there. We wanted to create a room full of soccer junkies and guys who had an appetite for the game, because that would drive a lot of other decisions that players would make. And we also wanted to make sure that the guys, even if they were a good fit for us on the field, that they would be good fit in the locker room. So you do digging into the character of people, how they are around training. And then I always loved, when I was recruiting, not just watching a player on the field, but you see how he leaves the field, who he talks to when he leaves the field, how he looks when he leaves the field. That's the big piece. Like, especially at a recruiting event, a college, showcase, guys who look, they take a pride in looking professionally as they're leaving the field, instead of just bumming. It's like they know they're presenting themselves to all these coaches, how they talk and who they interact with, how they interact, all that kind of stuff, makes a big difference in how they're going to be away from their family and when it's just them at school. So I think those are pluses, and along with that, I mean, you want guys with personality. You want guys that aren't just duds. At least some coaches are a different way. They want guys who maybe are stoics, and that's their team's personality. We always wanted guys that had personality, that were cracking jokes or involved with their teammates in like a really like positive way. Because then if we put a locker room full of those guys, like, you have a locker room full of personality, and that's awesome. And so it all, again, I think those things are pretty consistent across the landscape of people that are recruiting. But it also depends a lot on what the coach is looking for. Like, I've seen coaches show up to field and go, man, that guy can't touch a ball. Like, he has no like technical skills. Oof, a 1 out of 5, but he's an incredible athlete, and he just runs and kicks people. And I want that, so it's like every school is different. And that's why it's fit. We go back to that. But with the character piece, I think is most people want good guys, because there's just less headaches in the long run.
And what piece of, and I know it's a big piece, but I'm still going to ask you this question, in looking at the academics of an athlete, what are you looking for aside from good grade? What really is it that makes, you can have an athlete that's a really good player, but if his academics aren't there, then obviously you can't get him to the university. So what are the major factors for academics?
And we always, so when I was at Pacific, there was always 1 or 2 guys who, like, academically we knew weren't the strongest, right? They weren't terrible, but maybe they had a skid in, sophomore year. Like, we had a couple instances where certain things in people's families or personal life during high school made their grades hit the skid. And we also had really good academic support at Pacific for players that weren't, the strongest. But on the whole, we were looking for guys who really handled their academics well. I mean, the 4.0 guy is ideal. It's just like, okay, we don't have to worry about academics with that guy. But we also had guys that were like 3.0 in high school, and then they were like 3.7s, 3.8s in college, because it was what they were inspired to do with what they had available. And then some, some of our guys, we had to do a lot of work in the first year or 2 years that they were with us to get them to prioritize it. And then, I saw a former player of mine that if you would have seen him academically coming out of high school, he was like, we had to babysit, and now he's a teacher. So awesome. We also prioritized our culture academically, and then we could, and on the whole, having really solid guys, maybe that needed a little guidance, but really solid guys in the classroom. And then we would add a couple guys that maybe needed, and we would pair them in their housing with guys who were a lot stronger, let's just say. It would be a good influence. So that was our strategy. But with my guys at Republic, I would always say, like, academics and athletics, you can't be really good at one and just forget about the other, because that's going to show up, right? You're going to be unsettled about a test or unsettled about a paper or something like that when you walk onto the training pitch, then you're going to be bad. So and that's not going to get you selected, and then it's going to go in through that spiral. So managing your time wisely, if you want to achieve in anything, like, you have to do that. And so that's really a lot of what academics is for high school and into college. Is it's not necessarily intelligence, but it is really being intentional with, hey, I have to do these things to be successful. And so how do I plan to be successful? And maybe I need to ask for help here, or maybe I need to sacrifice this social life piece to make sure that the things that are important, academics and athletics, are I'm doing well. And I think that's where I've been able to get through to a lot of people who, a lot of guys that I've had that have said, hey, I hate going to school. Yeah, okay, but how do we get you to realize that it's, first of all, it's not that bad, and second of all, it's really about how you just manage yourself and handle what you need to handle, and so that you can do what you want to do. And that's a good life lesson, right? It's like, you're not always going to be able to do what you want to do. So right now you have to do academics, and if you do them really well, there's a big positive. If you don't do them really well, now you're going to shut doors for yourself. So what would you rather have?
Yeah. So for foreign athletes, and that's all, and I mean, you kind of nailed it 100%. And that's not only just at the soccer level, but any sport you look at going into university. That's what needs to be the mindset, and it's really, I mean, the way you're explaining as you were a coach there is perfect. And like, if I'm looking for a university that has a coach that supports, however my kid is approaching academics and his sport together, that's what you really want in a coach, is someone that can address that. And if my kid is teetering around 3.0 or a little bit lower than that, I mean, what you said, pairing up with I'm not going to say a smarter kid, but a kid with a higher GPA, that's amazing. That'd be like having a great tutor right there living with you.
Yeah.
Now, and we're coming up towards the tail end of this, so I'm going to ask a few more questions, and then we'll go in like a little speed round. But for the foreign recruit or the foreign athlete looking to be at an American university, is that a slightly different path, or how are you getting exposure to those athletes outside the United States? And then, what can they do to find a path to an American university to play their sport?
Absolutely. So that is that's happening a whole lot more on the soccer side of things. As you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of very well established academies, youth development systems around the world, and those players are recognizing college. There is a university level of soccer a lot of places, but it's usually not very high. And so a lot of guys at 18, 19, 20 are realizing, hey, I can play at a high level and get my degree and pursue professional aspirations, or just see a different part of the world through going to college in the United States and playing. So the couple ways that I've seen most effective, usually the video piece and having a real well put together CV to be able to send out. But you send out these blasts, and then everybody gets those, and some people read, some people don't. So that's one way. The other way that I've seen it, which is really common now, is recruiting by friends, by players who are in place, and they're having a good experience, whatever the case may be, and then they can put you in touch with a coach or whatever. And then these services, there's a lot of different services. There's obviously good and bad about them, but there's showcases. I know there's showcases in quite a few different countries in Europe and South America that are, and even in Africa, where players are being found by people will bring in these coaches and have them there for a week or a couple days, and they'll see a couple showcase games, and that's a good way for players to get picked up. So that's obviously one way. But then also doing your research and saying, hey, here are here's a couple schools that I'm interested in, and here's my video, here's my CV, and then making sure that you're aware of the translation of academic information to each school. And every school is going to be different. Some systems like CSU or UC will be similar, but then also the individual schools could be different. So it's important to do your homework on that.
As you've moved on to professional coaching now, what can you talk about is now talking about that college athlete that's looking to make that jump to semi-pro or professional? What are the major differences in a college player and a professional player, and what's the reality of going pro for those college athletes or soccer players?
So that's the benefit here in the United States is that the professional options are expanding year after year. There's more jobs available. I think that I think it has a lot to do with the college season being so short. There's a higher emphasis on winning the game as opposed to developing good habits for training. So it's like college soccer is a lot about winning and recovery, and professional soccer is a lot about like training, development, like of an idea through the week to be able to then win on the weekend and continue to win successfully over time. So the training habits become really, really important. And that's where I see most players, just their standard for training habits. You see a couple colleges that produce a lot of players going professionally, and those coaches really hammer into those guys. Hey, training habits are important, even if, we're not having a full week of training every week. It's more prep for the game and whatnot, but still their habits, or during the off season, they really hammer those habits. And so that's where you see a big change. And the ability to then do that against men. You see a lot of players their first year into the professionals kind of start really hot and then burn out because they just haven't been used to sustaining that for 10 months, 11 months out of the year. It's been like a crazy 3.5 months, and then a couple months of a break, and then back in the spring, which isn't as intense as the fall. So it's really that adjustment to life at a higher intensity for a much longer duration that I see players struggling with, along with the training habits.
Now, this question is probably a very heavy-weighted question, and you don't have to go deep into details, but from the soccer's perspective or the football perspective, what are, and I'm trying to phrase this without you having to give like a 20-minute answer, because I know there's a lot to it, but some of the top skills, particularly the specific positions on the field that you look for, whether it's college recruiting. Let's just talk college recruiting with it, because professional is a whole nother thing. But if you're out recruiting, looking at players, top ones, you could keep it, the top one or two, if you want to answer that.
Obviously, every coach is going to be different. Every coach is going to see the game different, want to play the game differently, so no two coaches being the same. I can't really speak for everyone. I can speak for myself. And the two things that I would say, especially for young players, as they're kind of moving through the junior high and high school ages, looking at college, I joke with players, but one of the best ways to improve your first touch and your passing technique with different surfaces of both feet is literally to spend a lot of time with the ball in a wall. And you can get a friend out there. Handball courts are perfect for it, but if you can hit a ball off a different point in the wall and receive however it comes off, if you can hit a ball, and it's really, it's easy to try different things. So it's important that it's not like, hey, I have to complete this pass because we're in training. It's more like, hey, challenge yourself to try the one that you messed up yesterday in training over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Because in soccer, the control of the ball is what buys time and space. And that's, as you certainly want to move up levels, the best thing you can do is be really in control of the ball. And you don't touch the ball a lot in the game, but you still you need to be able to touch it well in the 3 minutes or so that you're on it, right? And so something that 30 minutes a day can make the world of difference if you think about how many days a week you could do that from 12 to 17 and where you would be at receiving balls, passing balls, different surfaces, left, right, and all of that. So that's one. The other thing that I think is very undervalued, it's shown. So a lot of the research shows that players who actually scan the field more and look for information off the ball make complete more forward passes than players who scan less. And so it's a little thing, but it can make a world of difference. So players, usually lower level players, watch the ball more. Higher level players watch the position of the defensive line or the position of their teammates on the opposite side of the field rather than the ball. And so that little thing for a young player, if you watch any of the best players in the world, Messi, Ronaldo, and they're really bad examples because they're so elite that it changes their search strategy. But other players that are top players, whether it's center backs, goalkeepers, midfielders, forwards, they look more. They look for more information more frequently than other players. And so those are the kind of the two that I would say without going into a half an hour explanation. But looking and checking your surroundings for information, and that's attack, defense, transition, doesn't matter. And then spending a ton of time with a ball and a wall and some cones and really making yourself as comfortable as possible with the ball coming anywhere and being able to send it quickly on target they're helpful no matter where you end up playing.
So last question before we go into this little fun speed round. It's just kind of an open-ended last, if you had, one big piece of advice for, soccer athletes that are looking to make it to the next step, what would it be? What should they focus on?
So my one piece of advice is that no coach will ever give you everything that you need to be where you want to be. And I think that's one thing that I learned on my journey, always searching for a coach to give me information that would make the difference. And I had some really good coaches, but they never gave me everything. So I had to do what I wanted. To do what I wanted to do, I had to do more. I had to search for more. I had to really think outside the box in terms of how I can get better. And so I've heard a lot of players say, "Oh, like my coach doesn't work on that," and I just kind of smile, and because it's just one of those things, right? Like if you're relying on somebody else to get you to where you want to be, then you might not get there. You don't know necessarily if they have the same path for you that you have mapped out. So, coaches and supporting people, individual coaches, administrators at the school, those types, they're really good resources. But in order to get to where you want to be, you need to be the one that's driving. You need to be the one that's looking for an extra percent here, an extra percent there. And so that's always my word of advice.
Real solid advice. So speed round, this is just a fun little thing. 3 questions. One, to start off, is your favorite athlete role model growing up?
Michael Jordan. So my name is Jordan Ferrell, and obviously as a young kid in the early 90s, Michael Jordan was the most visible athlete, but also he was an incredible competitor. And I'm a very competitive person. So that was my real guy I love to watch, soccer player. big Xavi Hernandez fan. As I started watching a lot of football is when he was really dominating at FC Barcelona. And he was just fun to watch. He can do everything, but he can really control a game. And I think those would be my favorite players. I'm also a big Phil Jackson fan. So I came to Phil Jackson and actually that was one of my coaching inspirations is he coached two of the greatest basketball players of all time and won a lot with them. And it's kind of cool how one person can have that influence. So,
favorite moment ever in your sport? Favorite moment that you yourself experienced in your sport playing?
Yeah. Playing. Oof. Yeah, playing. There was an assist that I had to one of my best friends who we grew up together, and then we played 4 years of college together. And it was a sweet move. It was a game winner in overtime, and he hit the daylights out of it. And that's one of my favorite moments.
Favorite professional sports moment that you got to witness, not necessarily in person, but just watching.
Yeah, no, certainly in person. So I went on a trip and saw Barcelona play Espanyol, which is a big derby in the city of Barcelona. Espanyol is kind of like they're not the big global brand club in Barcelona. Barcelona is. So we went, we watched, and just an incredible move by Iniesta to keep his feet and slide a ball to Messi. Messi dribbled like 6 guys on top of the 18 and shot. And then the rebound was finished by Suarez. And it's an insane moment. Like, we had also been listening to some lectures from Barcelona earlier, a couple days before. So we had this whole picture of kind of what they were dreaming about building players and, insight into their youth development strategy. And you have 2 guys who were really developed through their academy at the 13 on up age groups. And I've not seen balance like that. And then just Messi being Messi was just unreal. So I think I was jumping up and down, hugging the guy next to me. So it was cool.
That's something that'd be amazing experience in person. So Jordan Farrell, head coach, Oakland Roots Sports Club. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to talk to us and help people understand the process of recruiting, of professional versus collegiate versus high school. Be sure to go check out Oakland Roots Sports Club. They should be kicking off here in a few months. They're in preseason right now. So they're already started, but their official matches will get going, help grow soccer, football in the Bay Area. It's a beautiful spot to have a team. So head out there, check them out, Oakland Roots Sports Club. Thank you, Jordan. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening to the Making an Athlete podcast. This podcast has been brought to you by our sponsor. Check us out at makinganathlete.com. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or on your favorite podcast platform. Be sure to catch our next episode.